Okay, welcome. I'm just going to talk about financial decision-making biases. And so when we make decisions, sometimes we can be influenced by our biases. And so that means it's the way that we see things may not be how things really are. So if we're here and we're looking at something, our bias is causing things for us to see things differently. And when it comes to financials, especially if you're not a financial manager, you're going to see things from your expertise and from your assumptions, and you'll probably clash with the people in the finance department because of the way that they see things. So before we start talking about decision-making biases, let's think about the brain. And so the researchers show that we think fast and we think slow. So thinking fast is our involuntary, our automatic, and our unconscious thinking. And that's where we jump to conclusions, because our brain can only handle so much information. And so it's easier for us to just to jump to conclusions. Thinking slow is where it's voluntary, it requires effort, and we are paying attention, as they call it, and we make a decision that way. But however, again, our mental capacity, we have scarce resources, and we can't have everything. And that's where we really talk about the 80-20 rule and using that in decision making. However, our brain likes to gravitate to use the least amount of effort, because it requires calories and effort to make decisions. And so sometimes we use our fast part of our brain and we make assumptions. And this is where, if we're using our fast part of the brain to make financial decisions, we can end up with bad results. So the problem is that neuroscience shows that making fast decisions uses a different part of the brain where you make logical and decisions. And that's why you need to slow down and come up with having a decision-making model to make decisions. But let's look at some of the biases that we see that people make when they're making financial decisions. And the first one is seeing patterns in random information. And this happens a lot when reading financial information. So people will look at the financial reports, the profit and loss, and sales may be dropping or GP may be going up and down. And based on something that's happened in the past, people will jump to an assumption of this is why this is happening. And this is where it can be dangerous to believe that this is happening, and they take action quickly. But you need to go in and ask further questions. You need to go and look, learn, and listen, is what we say. And so you test the assumptions that you've made. So you're not looking for patterns that may not actually be there. The second one is called expertise constraints. And so that's where you're great in your field. You're an expert in your field. However, when you tackle a problem that is outside of your expertise, or if the conditions of the field that you're in have changed, then you're not as good at making decisions. And so your expertise will actually hinder you, or you'll make worse decisions. And so sometimes you actually, so in this case, if you're an expert, you have great expertise, but it's an inch wide, but hundreds of feet deep. So if the decision or your field changes or it's outside there, that's where you're going to have an issue. And one example that's really relevant to us today, and we worked with a number of organisations, is in the not-for-profit industry with the transformation because of NDIS. And being experts in the not-for-profit industry, but then NDIS coming in and causing not-for-profits to actually have a different business model has caused there to be a lot of either poor decision-making or biases that affects their decision-making. And so that's one way that one way you need to come around to get over that is to look, learn, and listen, and have checklists so you're asking the right questions. The third one is anchoring. And so the anchoring bias, the simplest, this is where managers rely on pre-existing information or the information that they first hear. So an example of that is, say if you're looking to buy a house, and you look at the price and they say it's $300,000. So the research shows that people are impacted by that first price that they see, not necessarily the real value of the house. So in financial situations, so maybe the finance department comes to a manager and says, we need to cut wages by 5%. And so the managers may then be anchored to that 5% figure, and then may not be focusing on the real problem that's in the business. And the real problem is having the correct structure for your customers and for your income level. And so it's looking at whether you have the right combination of skills and expertise in the business, and not just looking at cutting 5%. And then maybe putting a business case to the finance department why cutting 5% is not valid. Maybe you can cut 10%, or maybe you need to increase based on the level of what customers want, or the level of income that you're doing. So these are three biases that affect financial decision making. So seeing patterns in random information, expertise constraints, and anchoring. So just look out for these sort of things, and make sure you come back to what we always talk about, having mental models and then having measures, so you're measuring the decisions that you make. Thank you.